The conference room fell completely silent the instant Rowan Mercer looked up from the contract in his hands and saw the woman walking toward him. Every executive around the polished table expected another routine introduction, another ordinary appointment. Instead, Rowan felt something he had not experienced in years. The company's brilliant new operations director carried herself with quiet confidence, genuine warmth, and an honesty that seemed impossible in a world where every smile usually hid an agenda. He had spent 15 years building walls around his heart after losing everything that once mattered. He never imagined that the person who would finally make those walls crack would also carry the family name that had destroyed his father's life. The moment he later met her father, the blood drained from his face. The surname alone reopened wounds that had never truly healed. If you believe kindness is stronger than hatred, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, and everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family. Rowan Mercer had become one of the youngest CEOs in the country's manufacturing industry through relentless discipline, impossible standards, and endless sacrifice. Employees respected him because he never asked anyone to work harder than he worked himself. Investors admired his sharp instincts. Competitors feared his determination. Yet beneath every accomplishment lived a lonely man who measured success by survival rather than happiness. Years earlier, his father had owned a small engineering company that supplied specialized equipment to several large corporations. It was an honest family business built over 3 decades, one contract at a time. Then one disastrous lawsuit accused his father of fraud. Banks withdrew support. Customers disappeared overnight. Friends vanished even faster. The company collapsed within months. Rowan watched his father lose not only his livelihood but also his confidence. The older man spent the rest of his life believing he had failed his family, even though he insisted until his final breath that he had been framed. No court ever cleared his name. No newspaper ever printed a correction. Rowan carried that injustice like a permanent scar. Success became his revenge. Every promotion, every expansion, every award felt like another brick laid over painful memories. Yet no amount of achievement erased the image of his father quietly packing family photographs into worn cardboard boxes after losing everything. Rowan promised himself that he would never trust anyone enough to give them the power to hurt him again. The company desperately needed a new operations director after months of declining efficiency. Dozens of highly qualified candidates interviewed for the position, but none impressed Rowan. Then Alara Whitmore arrived. She was unlike anyone he had ever hired. She did not exaggerate her accomplishments or recite rehearsed leadership slogans. Instead, she spoke passionately about helping ordinary employees succeed because strong companies were built by people who felt respected. She described mistakes she had made earlier in her career and explained how those failures shaped her leadership. She admitted uncertainty where others pretended perfection. That honesty stood out more than any impressive resume. Within weeks, the atmosphere inside the company began changing. Departments that barely communicated started collaborating. Employee turnover slowed dramatically. Factory workers smiled more often. Managers who once competed against one another began solving problems together. Rowan noticed something unusual happening inside himself as well. Meetings became conversations he actually looked forward to attending. He caught himself smiling after discussing future projects with Alara. He admired not only her intelligence but also her compassion. She remembered birthdays. She quietly arranged emergency financial assistance for an employee whose child required surgery. She spent lunch breaks sitting beside new hires instead of executives. She believed every person deserved dignity regardless of job title. For the first time in years, Rowan imagined a future that included more than quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. Months passed, and their professional respect slowly transformed into genuine affection. Neither rushed the relationship. Both understood the importance of trust. They spent weekends volunteering at community renovation projects, speaking with local students about career opportunities, and visiting parks simply to enjoy peaceful afternoons away from constant business pressure. Rowan found himself laughing more than he had since his 20s. One bright Saturday afternoon, Elara invited Rowan to attend a charity luncheon hosted by her parents. She spoke fondly of her family, describing them as generous supporters of education and healthcare initiatives. Rowan welcomed the opportunity. Meeting her parents felt like a natural next step. The luncheon took place inside a beautiful historic estate filled with laughter, sunlight, and families supporting local scholarships. Everything seemed perfect until Elara introduced Rowan to her father. The older gentleman extended his hand with a warm smile and introduced himself as Gregory Whitmore. Rowan froze. That name echoed through his memory like thunder. Gregory Whitmore, the businessman whose corporation had accused Rowan's father of fraud, the executive whose testimony had convinced banks to abandon the Mercer family business. The man Rowan had blamed for destroying his childhood. His heartbeat pounded so loudly he barely heard anything else. Gregory looked equally surprised after hearing Rowan's surname. Years of buried grief suddenly returned with unbearable force. Rowan excused himself almost immediately and left the luncheon before anyone could stop him. Elara spent the next several days confused and heartbroken. Rowan ignored calls, messages, and meeting requests. His emotions overwhelmed every rational thought. The woman he had begun to love belonged to the family responsible for his father's suffering. Eventually, Elara requested one final conversation during a company leadership retreat held at a lakeside conference center on a beautiful autumn afternoon. She deserved answers. Rowan finally explained everything, that he described watching moving trucks carry away his family's belongings, that he described classmates whispering that his father was a criminal, that he described hospital visits where his father insisted everything would somehow become alright despite knowing it never would. That he described attending his father's funeral while carrying unanswered questions that haunted him every single day afterward. Elara listened without interruption. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the depth of pain Rowan had carried alone for so many years. When he finished, she quietly admitted that her father rarely discussed those events. She had always believed the lawsuit had been an unfortunate business dispute resolved decades earlier. She never knew another family had suffered so completely. Instead of defending Gregory, she promised Rowan only one thing: she would search for the truth. Over the following weeks, Elara examined forgotten company archives, legal correspondence, insurance records, and internal memoranda preserved inside storage facilities scheduled for digitization. What began as curiosity slowly uncovered disturbing inconsistencies. Critical financial documents had been altered, engineering reports disappeared shortly before court hearings, anonymous whistleblower letters had never reached investigators. Most shocking of all, evidence suggested that Gregory Whitmore himself had repeatedly questioned whether Rowan's father was actually guilty, but outside legal advisors convinced him that continuing the lawsuit protected shareholders from greater financial losses. Gregory had never intended to destroy another family. He had trusted dishonest advisors who manipulated evidence for their own benefit. By the time he realized something was terribly wrong, the damage had already become irreversible. The revelation devastated him. Gregory requested a private meeting with Rowan at the original Mercer factory site, which had long since become an empty industrial lot filled with weeds and cracked pavement. Bright afternoon sunlight illuminated the abandoned building where Rowan had once spent childhood weekends helping his father organize tools. Gregory arrived carrying several weathered boxes. Inside were handwritten journals, engineering notebooks, internal investigations, and letters his legal team had advised him never to send. One unfinished letter apologized directly to Rowan's father. Gregory confessed that fear of public embarrassment had prevented him from admitting uncertainty while the lawsuit unfolded. His silence had allowed innocent people to suffer. He admitted his greatest professional achievement had become his deepest personal regret. Rowan stood speechless. Hatred had sustained him for years. Without it, he felt strangely empty. Gregory did not ask for forgiveness. Instead, he announced that his family's charitable foundation would establish a permanent engineering scholarship in Rowan's father's name, ensuring future students from struggling families could pursue careers in manufacturing and innovation. He also pledged substantial funding to restore abandoned vocational training centers across the region because he believed honest craftsmanship deserved respect again. For the first time since losing his father, Rowan saw genuine remorse instead of arrogance. Healing did not happen instantly. Forgiveness never arrives as a single dramatic moment that it grows slowly through difficult choices made again and again. Rowan spent many afternoons walking alone through parks, remembering lessons his father had taught him. One memory returned more often than any other. His father once said that carrying anger forever was like carrying a heavy toolbox after the work had already been finished. Eventually the weight hurts only the person refusing to set it down. Those words changed everything. Rowan realized he had built an extraordinary company but never allowed himself to build a peaceful life. He met Alara again during a community ribbon-cutting ceremony celebrating the first restored vocational training center funded jointly by both families. Children toured classrooms filled with modern equipment. Retired engineers volunteered as mentors, young apprentices imagined brighter futures. Watching hope replace bitterness felt more meaningful than any business award Rowan had ever received. He thanked Alara for choosing truth instead of comfort. She thanked him for finding courage instead of revenge. Together they dedicated themselves to creating opportunities for families facing hardships similar to those both their families had experienced from opposite sides of the same tragedy. Years later, employees often remarked that the company had become known not simply for profits, but for compassion. Scholarships expanded nationwide. Apprenticeship programs transformed countless lives. Former rivals collaborated on community projects. Business leaders frequently visited to study a corporate culture built on accountability, honesty, and humanity. Rowan eventually understood that while success could rebuild buildings, only forgiveness could rebuild hearts. Before we reach the end of this story, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe forgiveness is possible after deep betrayal, or whether some wounds can never fully heal. Your thoughts may encourage someone quietly carrying their own burden today. As the afternoon sun cast its golden light across the restored training center, Rowan looked at the bronze plaque bearing his father's name. He no longer saw a symbol of loss. He saw proof that even the darkest chapters can become the foundation for someone else's brighter future. Beside him stood Alara, whose compassion had uncovered the truth instead of hiding from it, and Gregory, whose humility reminded everyone that admitting mistakes takes far greater strength than pretending perfection. None of them could erase the past, but together they transformed pain into purpose, sorrow into service, and broken trust into lasting hope. Rowan finally understood that his father had not been defeated by injustice because his integrity had survived long after false accusations faded away. In the end, the greatest victory was never becoming richer than those who hurt him. It was becoming kinder than the pain that once defined him. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Thank you for being part of our community, where stories of kindness, redemption, and second chances continue to remind us that hope is always worth believing in.